Hey folks, welcome back to the channel as I continue doing some previews for the playoffs of the Blast Austin Major, and in this one we are going to be taking a look at Spirit versus Mousesports in the quarterfinals, as this is by far the most interesting of the quarterfinals matchups. I think it's also one of the most grueling ones, as we already have two top four teams in the world having to face off against each other so early in the bracket, and what is kind of an imbalanced bracket, but just based on the way things played out in stage 3, this is the situation that we are left with. And so we are going to get into Spirit versus Mousesports here soon. But before I do, if you would not mind, please go ahead and subscribe to this channel if you are not already. We're aiming for 5,000 subscribers at the time of me recording this video, and every subscription certainly helps on my way to that goal. Also, leaving a like and a comment down below helps the algorithm, helps the channel grow as well. So if you want to get involved in the discussion about this match, and if you like this video, please do consider doing those things as well. I would really appreciate it. But without further ado, let's get into this matchup between Spirit and Mousesports, and we'll start off the conversation with Team Spirit. Now, there is no denying the fact that Spirit is a top 4 team in the world. Where exactly you place them at is a little bit more tricky. Obviously, Vitality is number 1, and Mousesports and Falcons for a time are really battling for number 2. But with Falcons flop at this major, and with Spirit having some great form lately, depending on how you look at things, the power rankings may have Spirit a little bit higher up the board. They are obviously the reigning champions of the previous major in Shanghai, where they had a great run through the playoffs of that tournament, having beaten Liquid, Mousesports, and FaZe in bracket play. Also had some wins over Na'Vi and Heroic in the groups of that elimination stage, and so really did put their name on the map as one of the best teams in the world. They also opened up this year very strong, winning the first event of the year at Blast Bounty, beating Heroic, Na'Vi, and what was then Eternal Fire, now Aurora, in a best-of-5 grand final. They then placed second at Katowice, only losing to Vitality, as Vitality was starting their streak of winning 6 titles in a row and having that 30 series in a row streak as well. And, you know, they beat some good teams along the way, though, to get that second place on the way to that matchup against Vitality. We saw them place top 4 at EPL Season 21. That's where they got knocked out by Mousesports in the semifinals. Then at Blast Open at Lisbon, they once again placed top 4, this time getting knocked out by Vitality in the semifinals, but again, racking up some wins against some solid teams along the way. Their only other loss to that tournament was again to Mousesports in the earlier stages of that tournament. We then saw them at Blast Rivals Copenhagen, again placing in the top 4, but didn't get any really quality wins at that event. They lost to Falcons in the best of 3. That was very close and won all 3 maps, and the final map in Dust 2 was overtime. And then they lost to Vitality once again in a semifinal, just as they did at Blast Open Lisbon. Now, this team did not take part in IEM Melbourne or IEM Dallas, and so we didn't see them as active as some of the other top teams in the world. And then their last tournament was, of course, at Astana, where they did win that event, the PGL Astana tournament there, but it was obviously against a softer field. Yes, they beat Gamer Legion. That was kind of a top 10-ish team, and Nip and Furia did look pretty fierce at that event, and Astralis with Hooksy standing in also did look in good form, but you're not going to give them massive heaps of credit for that win, as you know, some of the wins that Vitality or others have gotten where they're playing up against the best teams in the world on a regular basis. However, Spirit did blitz through stage 3 of this major by just mowing over Pain and Lin Vision in best of 1s, and then they played against Na'Vi in the best of 3, where yes, the Anubis game was close, but Train was a landslide, and so they have yet to drop a map so far at the major, but it certainly helped that they got the start in stage 3, and their first 2 opponents weren't necessarily the highest ranked teams, if we're being 100% honest. When it comes to Spirit's map pool, they do have a pretty damn strong one. They have one of the best map pools in the world. Obviously, Vitality is number 1, but Spirit certainly puts themselves in the conversation for being pretty well-rounded. They obviously have a fantastic Dust 2. They are 19-2 this year on the map, and they've won their last 7 games in a row, and you can see they're a very high percentage win rate. Nuke also very strong for them, 13-5 record this year. They are 6-1 in their last 7 games, and once again, you can see a very high win rate. Train, 6-1 record, sits right there just below their Dust 2 in win rate. And then Anubis, 9-4 for the year, but they're 8-2 in their last 10 games played, and so their Anubis has also been very strong. So they have a super strong formats that they can play, in my opinion. Their Ancient's not too shabby, 5-3 record there. And then Mirage has been a little bit more hit and miss, to be honest. The 7-5 record, but still a positive win rate, and still at times does show us a pretty good eye test on the map. And obviously, this team does not play Inferno. Now, as far as the talent on this team, we all know that Spirit houses one of the greatest riflers we've seen play Counter-Strike, particularly in that aggressive entry role, and that is, of course, Donk. There is no one like Donk. This dude just seems impossible to deal with on a consistent basis. His entering power on the T side is phenomenal. Obviously, a fantastic aggressive defender as well. You know, there have been times even where Spirit are now letting him trade frag a bit more instead of hard entering. There's some times where they leave him in a spot in the map and let him kind of call his own shots and maybe kind of develop more into the mid to late round as well. But the bottom line is that this guy is just all around a crazy rifler, insane movement, insane aim, and probably the best player in the world right now. I mean, it's a debate between him and ZywOo, obviously, but for the role that Donk plays and how much impact he has for his team and the fact that he doesn't have as strong a supporting cast around him as ZywOo, I think you probably would give him best player in the world right now just from what we are seeing him output, and the exception has not been this major. He is still playing at a very, very high level. Then Shiro obviously goes down as one of the best oppers in the world. You're obviously going to rate him below ZywOo and m0NESY, but I mean, the guy is fantastic. At times, I have thought Torzy's been a little bit more impactful because he was a little bit more aggressive, a little bit more dynamic. But we have seen Shiro evolve as an operator this year, where he has become a lot more aggressive. He is going for more opening picks on the T side at times. He is looking to go for more forward positions defensively at times as well. We've seen him be willing to fight past utility and go for plays. Yes, he's still not one of the most aggressive operators in the world, like a Torzy or a Maladoy or a Wrinkle or a Simple or some of these guys like that, but I do think he has certainly leveled up and gotten away from the more passive criticisms that he has been given in the past, and he is a fantastic player. The 1-2 punch of Donk and Shiro is one of the more powerful ones that you're going to find in Counter-Strike. Now, after that, though, is where Spirit always is in a weird predicament, because Xontix and Magics at times can pop off and at times have wonderful games, but they are very much inconsistent and are more of a wild card factor. I've always thought that if Spirit can just get one of those two rolling, that they can compete with anyone in the world. And Magic so far has been fantastic at Austin, and Xontix has been okay. He's been all right. And we have seen at times both of these players step up in key moments, like when Magic stepped up in the major in Shanghai, for example. And then Xontix has had his events and such as well where he's performed really well. You know, he is very young in his career, just like Donk coming from the academy system. It just turned out that Donk was a phenom and Xontix just isn't quite that, you know, but so far, so good at the major, and usually at least one of these guys can at least get something going, and if they can, this team really can propel forward and be one of the best that you've seen play. Now, though, we will talk about their opponents, Mousesports. So ever since Mousesports made the transition with Spinks coming into the squad, adding some more firepower to the team, and Brolin taking the in-game leadership, they have been a consistent top 3 force in the world over the last few months. They obviously won their debut event with the full 5 at the PGL Cluj-Napoca event, beating teams like Virtus.pro, Pain, and Astralis in the groups in the earlier bracket matches, and then they beat Falcons 3-1 in the best of 5 grand final to go ahead and take home that trophy. And since then, they have still very consistently been placing inside the top 4 and have made 3 additional finals, one of which was, of course, EPL Season 21, where they had some wins over teams like G2 and Spirit, but then ultimately got 0-3'd by Vitality in the grand finals. At Blast Open Lisbon, they powered up a little bit more, once again making the finals of that event with wins over Falcons and Spirit and G2 and Aurora on their way. But they played Vitality close this time around. They had an 0-2 loss earlier in the tournament against Vitality, where both maps went 11-13. And then this time in the grand finals, once again a best of 5, of course, they did push it to all 5 maps, and that was after losing the first map 0-13. They still managed to force it into a 5th map and did look like they were really pushing Vitality to their limits. At IEM Melbourne, it was a bit of a step back for them. They got some wins over Gamer Legion and Mongols, but did get beat by Falcons in a BO3. That was pretty convincing for Falcons. Then at the Blast Rivals event, they once again were stopped by Falcons in the semifinals, with a top 4 finish. They had another close best of 3 against Vitality in that, and they had a win over FaZe. But once again, Falcons was kind of pulling ahead of them in that race for number 2 at the time. But then at IEM Dallas, we saw they were able to get their revenge over Falcons, as well as beat Mongols to once again make a grand final against Vitality. But this time they slipped back into 0-3 fashion, unlike the previous couple of best of 3s and the best of 5 from Blast Open Lisbon, where they were really pushing Vitality to their limits. And honestly, this major has been a little bit worrisome for Mousesports when you look at the big picture. They had some close losses to FaZe and VP in the BO1s in Stage 3, so fair enough. But then even in the best of 3s on their way back, which can be a very grueling journey, to be fair, and so I do want to add that for context, they nearly lost to Team Liquid. It went all 3 maps, and that third map was very close. Then they also had to go a full 3 maps against Aurora, and then they even had a labored win against Legacy, who was on a miracle run at this major, losing the opening map and having some tight final 2 maps in that series. And so this has not been nearly as convincing of a Mousesports as we have seen throughout the course of this year. Yes, they have made it to the playoffs, and so mission accomplished in that regard, and they have a few days off to reset. But even when you look at some of their interviews and some of the comments that some of these guys have made, they know that they are struggling. You know, Brolin had some comment about them running out of ideas at times. You've had a couple of other players kind of step up and say that they've really struggled. They need to step it up if they want to have a chance at these playoffs, and that's true, right? That is very much going to be the case. But overall, outside of some, slightly worrying signs at this major in Stage 3, we know this is one of the best teams in the world. And being one of the best teams, again, they themselves have a pretty solid map pool to work with at this tournament. Ancient, they have a 10-4 record, looking very solid there. Mirage, 12-6 record. Nuke, 15-6 record. And then Train, they are 5-2. So you can see some pretty solid win percentages there for kind of their core 4 maps. Their Dust 2 is a little bit more of a 50-50 lately. 9-8 record on D2. And then their Inferno has kind of struggled. 8-11 record. But luckily for them, they're not really going to have to worry about it in this matchup, but it could become a factor if they're able to push past Spirit, and depending on who they find themselves up against in the next game. Of course, they are a team that does not play Anubis. As far as player form goes, I think there's kind of 2 ways to look at this. There's a way to look at it from what they have looked like overall this year with this lineup, and then what we've seen so far at the Major. And so Spinks, since coming to the team, has been a fantastic trader on the T side in particular. When you get this guy out into open space for map control, or when you're going for an execute, this guy trades so effectively behind Xerxin or behind Brolin, or even behind, one of the other extremity players if they're willing to go in first, like we see Jimmy sometimes doing a couple of their executes. So just really, really good job. And he has had some solid form in Austin so far. He's been their best player. Xerxin, I've always thought that he was a solid entry fragger, also a very solid defender, plays some with star roles and anchor roles here and there. I feel like he's leveled up over time on this team. He's one of the guys that has finally gotten over the hump of being able to perform on the big stage. And at this event, he's been kind of their number 2 guy behind Spinks, but he has had a couple of shaky moments. Speaking of shaky moments, Torzsi has normally been the most reliable player on this team this year, outside of maybe Spinks. He's been a fantastic opper. At sometimes I've even ranked him as high as 3rd, but no lower than 4th. Very aggressive, also has an effective rifle. He's usually one of their best players, and another guy who's been able to start delivering on the big stages and kind of getting Mouse past that studio merchant storyline. But he's had some struggles in Austin in some of these games, if we're honest, right? And then Jimmy, their reliable anchor, has also had some issues in Austin here and there. But for the most part, you expect them to play his extremity roles on the T side well, as well as be a great anchor on the CT side defensively. And then Brolin, he's always been kind of hit or miss since taking over the IGL mantle, but he's certainly still one of the more skilled players in the IGL slot when it comes to fragging. And, this team overall this year with Brolin at the helm, I feel like didn't lose out too much tactically. I feel like the brain trust he has with Sakron and the fact that they already had, some protocols and strats and, default roles and things kind of already established, when Shuhei was the IGL of the team, he was able to kind of just pick those things up and keep them operating. Yes, they've had to make some changes, with obviously Brolin making some of his positions differently to cover for Shuhei. Obviously, they want to give Spinks some of the spots that he wants to play, and so that has, caused maybe Jimmy or Brolin to kind of have to pivot a little bit on some maps. But for the most part, they've been able to kind of keep a similar system, and they have a lot of active voices on this team, like Xerxes and Torzi in particular, who are going to help with the mid-rounding, who are going to come in with ideas at times. But it does feel like at this major, they hit a bit of a wall in some games where they did run out of ideas, or maybe the calling wasn't as sharp as it had been. And I had always thought the most impressive thing about Brolin taking over the IGL position is that they didn't really lose out on their mid-rounding. They still seemed very effective, and that was usually one of the first things to falter when you bring in an inexperienced IGL. Yeah, you have like that former IGL hangover effect where you're able to keep some strengths, but can they actually keep it going when the going gets tough? And they have many times in several tournaments this year, but at this major, they have hit a couple of bumps in the road. They're going to have to use this break effectively to figure out how to navigate some of those woes and make sure they come and play at their highest level possible. As far as the head-to-head history goes for this team, they have obviously played each other a lot over the last year or so, but really the only ones that matter are the ones that we're going to look at the top, which is, of course, their meeting at EPL and then their meeting at the Blast Open Lisbon event, as these are the only two matches that these teams have played against each other with their current 5-man lineups. And as you can see, these matches usually get very damn close. Ancient and Dust 2 Ancient, Dust 2 and Nuke have been featured in each matchup, and some of these map scores have been incredibly close, particularly on Nuke and Ancient. You can see it's gone into overtime on Nuke both times. It has gone into some close games on Ancient both times. And then Dust 2 is a map that has gone Spirit's direction both times in a little bit more of a one-sided fashion. But Mousesports have always come out on top in these best of threes 2-1. So the two matches they've had, Mouse have won it. But you can see it's pretty damn close. It's not like Spirit didn't have chances to win these games. Again, it seems like they have Dust 2 in their pocket. And then Ancient and Nuke always get incredibly close. When it comes to how the veto will play out, when we look at the bans, we obviously know that Spirit does not play Inferno, which Mousesports is probably happy about because their Inferno has been kind of shaky this year, and so in that sense, they're not really losing out much on Spirit taking Inferno out of the map pool. However, with Mousesports banning Anubis, that is a tough one for Spirit because that is a map that Spirit are certainly very fond of playing and have a very good record on. When it comes to picks, obviously Spirit have some massive strengths on Dust 2, and they've already been able to beat this team on Dust 2 on multiple occasions. Nuke has also been a very strong map for Spirit, and it's come up in this matchup a couple of times, and it's awfully close each time, but Mousesports have come out on top in both of those instances. Train is another map that I feel like Spirit has shown some really big strengths on, but Mouse has been able to play the map as well. Mousesports, meanwhile, certainly can look towards a map like Ancient, which they have already been able to beat Spirit on a couple of times. And I think Mirage can also still be a pick option for Mousesports, as we have seen Spirit be kind of shaky on Mirage at times, whereas Mousesports have been playing pretty good on average on Mirage throughout the course of this year. Now, in their previous matchups this year with these lineups, they have stuck to their permabans with Mousesports removing Anubis and Spirit removing Inferno, so I imagine we're going to see the exact same thing. We have seen Mouse pick Nuke both times they have played against each other, and they've won them both in very close situations. When it comes to Spirit, they have picked Dust 2 in both situations and have been able to win it in a more one-sided fashion, and then they have always filtered down to Ancient as a third map, as we've usually seen Spirit remove Train in the matchup, and Mousesports actually remove Mirage in both situations. So I'll be curious to see if that pattern holds, or if we see a slight difference, at least in the third map being played, when you've already seen two teams play against each other twice, and it's been an identical map pool, and we see an identical result of Mousesports winning both times. That might be where Spirit might want to shake things up a little bit. Maybe they want to actually play some Train this time around. Maybe Mousesports changed up and decided that they want to play Mirage this time around. That there could be some differences there, but all in all, this is what we've seen so far. And so, with that said, it is true that Mousesports have been victorious in both meetings they have had previous to this one, but Spirit has always played them awfully close, and they do look like they're in a little bit better shape so far in Austin than what Mousesports has provided. I do think that Mousesports have more widely distributed talent across their team, where pretty much all of their players are going to be fairly skilled. You know, if you go Brolin versus Chopper, for example, you're going to pick Brolin all the time as the better fragger in that scenario, right? And then when you look across the board, yes, Donk is going to probably be the best player on the server. Shiro and Torzy can sometimes be pretty equal in their impact with the AWP, though certainly Shiro looks like he's in a little bit better form than Torzy so far in Austin. And I do think that Shiro has also turned a new leaf lately by playing a little bit more aggressively, and so he and Torzy can really go head-to-head with the AWP very, very well, and they could really go either direction, in my opinion, as far as that goes. But then after that, I do think the supporting cast of Spinks and Jimmy is going to be stronger than that of Xontix and Magics. And so, again, Mouse with the more widely distributed talent, but Spirit with maybe the higher skill ceiling. Certainly in the case of Donk, they had the best player in the server, again, in my opinion. And so that alone can get Spirit over the edge. When you're already having a close competition between these two teams, if Donk pops off, he could just carry the game and help his team become victorious. And obviously, with Shiro being willing to go for a little bit more now, he is going to provide a little bit of extra value with AWP than he has in their previous two matchups, in my opinion. And then after that, again, it's just if one of Xontix and Magic can show up and equal some of the output of a Spinks or a Jimmy, then all of a sudden it puts them right there neck and neck, just as the previous two matchups have been. I do think this time around Spirit will be the victor. I think that they will learn from their previous two matchups. I think they're also in the better form, and I also just feel like they've added a couple of new elements to the team. They have a little bit more of a stable leadership structure with their coach and with Chopper at the IGL helm, whereas Brolin, this is his first major as an IGL, right? And we have seen them already look a little bit shaky at different moments. But if I'm being realistic, this is still a very close matchup, and I think their previous meetings show it. I think there's certainly a way forward for Mousesports to win this thing. I just kind of put it more at like a 60-40 in favor of Spirit, like a 55-45 in favor of Spirit. But certainly this is another really tough matchup to predict. I'd have Spirit just edging out Mousesports this time, though. But again, if you enjoyed the video, please subscribe, like, comment down below, and I'll catch you next time.